Today, we're going to try and answer a question that has been on my mind for ages and probably no one else is asking. Who is the main character in The Dumping Ground? Now, it might sound like a pretty stupid question, but in this entire franchise with all of these different Tracy Beaker TV shows, every single TV show has a main character, that being Tracy Beaker. The Dumping Ground is quite literally the opposite of that. It's the exact same TV shows as The Story of Tracy Beaker, as Tracy Beaker Returns, but without the main character, without Tracy Beaker. Instead, it's an ensemble show, and the reason why it's an ensemble show is the reason why it's been able to go on for so long, and why it's still going on even though the entire cast has now regenerated. But in saying that, there have definitely been some standout characters over the years that you could have said carried the show and could have been classed as the sole main character of the show. So I thought today, let's try and work out who that character is, if there even is one. Now, when I ask you who is the main character of The Dumping Ground, most of you will probably think Jodie Jackson. She was in it for ages. She had loads of episodes focusing on her. The main relationship in the show, Tyler and Jodie, was all focused on her. And if you'd have asked me before making this video, is Jodie Jackson the main character of The Dumping Ground? I would have said yes. However, there are different ways you could look at this. If we just go off how many episodes a character has appeared in, and the character that has the most number of episodes is the main character, we would therefore make Floss the main character. However, I don't think Floss is the main character of The Dumping Ground. You could say maybe it's the care worker, since the care worker stays throughout most of the episodes. So you could have said maybe Mike is the main character, and when his ending episode came around, it kind of looked like it was the end of the show, but then we've had several seasons without Mike, and I don't think Mei Lee is the main character, so who on earth is? Well, today we're going to go through each series and try and work out who the main character of each series is, then tally them up, and then eventually, by working out which character has the most series main character moments, then we should be able to work out who the main character of this show is. Now, this is going to be very overestimated. It's not going to be the most accurate video you will see. However, it's going to give us a rough estimate as to who the true main character of The Dumping Ground is. And what we're going to be looking at each series is we're going to be looking at who gets the intro, who gets the outro episodes, because those are always big episodes, sometimes even two-parters, maybe even three-parters. Who gets the middle episode, because usually there's a middle episode per series which focuses on a character and a big storyline moment, and which character is mostly relevant in each episode throughout a series. So let's go through each series, starting from series 1 all the way up to series 11, and I should say we are going to be classing parts as individual series. So series 3 part 1, series 3 part 2. So let's start with series 1. Who is the main character? It has got to be Faith Davis. Now, Faith, of course, joined The Dumping Ground in the first episode. She was the first new cast member after this current set of cast came from Tracy Beaker Returns, and she's basically there to sort of act like the villain for Tracy Beaker not being there. In the first episode, it's a two-parter where she basically runs the house as if she was Tracy Beaker. We get the middle episode that focuses on her brother, and we find out weird things about her past, and we don't really know too much about her. She's very relevant in everyone else's stories. For example, when Gus leaves, she's relevant in that story, and the finale focuses on her and her brother Raz coming back. She's definitely the main character. Every character looks up to her, every character wants to speak to her, and she's very relevant throughout all the episodes. So I'd say Faith wins in series 1. Series 2, I had a mix-up between either Bailey or Frank. Now, it starts with a two-parter introducing Bailey, and Bailey has a lot of episodes about him. We have episodes discussing his dad, discussing the fact that he can't read. We've got a really serious episode, Sticks and Stones, about racism and how that affects his character. And since we're in a new care home, Ashton Ridge, in this series, and we've got this new character Bailey who we're focusing on so much, it does feel like Bailey could be the main character. But then we also have Frank, who is dedicated a whole ending episode to him. The middle episode is all about finding Frank because he's disappeared and people can't find him and he's living on the streets. The finale focuses on the return of Frank's best friend Liam, and so Frank definitely could be classed as the main character of this series. However, I think I'm gonna have to give it to Bailey for this episode because Bailey is there for all the episodes, Frank isn't present for all the episodes. Moving on to series 3 part 1, I'm gonna have to go between Harry, T, Carmen and Ryan. there's quite a lot going on here. Now, the two-part intro basically focuses on all of them because they're all trying to get fostered, and it's Ryan's intro episode. Carmen has a lot of episodes focusing on her, not just that intro, but also Stuck With You, Fake It to Make It, where she gets those glasses, Now You See Me. All of those episodes are focusing on her. T also has a lot of prominent things happening to her during this series. We've got the breaking in with Kazima, we've got Dragon Slayer where her brother Johnny leaves, and we've also got Now You See Me. If we move on to Harry, this whole series arc is basically about Harry being fostered and then the fostering not going very well, with at the beginning him trying to get fostered. The middle episode actually looks at him getting fostered, and in the episode 9, Long Way Home, we have the fact that Harry's fostering doesn't go very well and he has to return to the dumping ground. And then we have Ryan, who basically seems to cling to anything that Harry does throughout this series. So for that reason, I'm gonna say it's either gonna be Harry or T who's winning this one. I'm leaning more towards Harry. Next, we've got Series 3 Part 2. I think Sasha wins this one. She's introduced in the two-part intro and is core to all of the episodes that happen. Series 4 Part 1 is next, and I think it's either going to be Carmen, Ryan, or Mike, who are all very big characters throughout the main storylines in this series. Bailey actually starts with the two-parter intro, but Carmen is also heavily involved, such as putting on the play at Ashton Ridge. The whole series arc focuses on this dynamic between Carmen and Ryan, and we see them getting closer. And it's looking at Carmen beginning to get ready to leave the DG, with episodes like her looking at university courses. And throughout the series, we're also finding out a lot more about Ryan. We get to meet Chloe for the first time, and we get to find out a bit more as to why he acts the way he is because of his past. But then the ending is a huge three-part ending where Mike ends up losing Carmen's file because he leaves it in the car, and Ryan is the one who steals the file, and we get this whole big scenario between Carmen, Mike, and Ryan where Mike might lose his job, Ryan is feeling really guilty, and Carmen basically turns into this awful person. And so for that reason, I think Ryan is going to win this series because most of what happens in this series is due to Ryan's actions. The big finale at the end, whilst it might focus on Mike and Carmen, is because of what Ryan does, is the reason why it happens. Series 4 Part 2 I think is all about Carmen and T, and I think they both just shared this series individually because this is all about them getting ready to leave. The final episode, whilst it focuses on Jodie, the penultimate episode focuses on Carmen and T leaving, and Carmen basically passing on the mantle of a sort of main character-esque to Jodie, and Jodie's actions in the final episode are because of how she feels towards Carmen and T. We also get a really weird bit in the middle where we get the three-parter with Sammy. However, Sammy isn't really relevant in any of those episodes, and Carmen and T are still quite relevant throughout all of them. And they've got the most episodes dedicated to them. They've got Doris, they've got two camps, and they've also got the leaving one. Series 5 Part 1, I'd say the main character is Kazima. Bailey again has the intro two-parter but ends up leaving, so he's definitely not the main character. And there are many episodes focusing on Kazima's past and home and her connection to the street where she meets Alice. We have episode 8 Belief, where we meet Alex and look at Kazima's relations to him, and then it kind of ends with a loosely three-part tied together story about Kazima's final days at the DG and how Alex and the other characters are going to cope without her. Series 5 Part 2, I'm going to give it to Tyler because with Kaz gone, Tyler sort of steps up as the sort of kid leader for the house. The episodes that mainly focus on Jodie are mainly about Jodie's love for Tyler, such as Mission Totally Possible, when Jodie's phone is taken away and the gang will get together to try and save the phone, and the only reason why they're doing that is because Jodie wants to keep the photos that she has of her and Tyler. The two-part finale is all about Ashton Ridge getting knocked down, and we get loads of returning characters. However, I'd say Tyler is the main leader of all of this happening because he's the one who invites all of these past characters to come back. He's the one who ends up getting the Umblebees to stop, and he's basically the main thread throughout that ending. And then there's a special two-part finale after this series ends, which is Tyler Island, which is literally all about Tyler's dream of getting with Jodie on an island. So it's definitely the main character. Series 6 Part 1 now, and I think it either goes to Jodie or Ryan. Two-part intro focuses on Jodie becoming homeless and dealing with her mum again, and there are several moments pointing towards Jodie's feelings for Tyler, such as in Utopia. But then we have a two-part ending, which is all about Ryan's ego getting completely out of control with Ryan Man, and it's sort of hard to judge because they're very mixed between the two of them each episode, and each episode focuses on several different characters, and so I'd say Jodie and Ryan win this one together. Series 6 Part 2, it's either Mike or Charlie. Now, there's a lot of moments between Jodie and Tyler in this series, series, such as the infamous No Escaping episode where Jodie locks Tyler in the attic. That is one of my favourite episodes. But there are a lot of moments between Charlie and Alex, such as their battle of the house between the girls and the boys in Joyless Division. However, we also have the two-part finale, which focuses on Mike's wedding and all of Mike's past care kids coming back to see his wedding, and we get the return of Tracy Beaker, so it's clearly a big series for Mike. But even then, throughout all of this, we've got Charlie and her grandfather. We've got the episode where Charlie talks about her grandfather's illness, and we see how close they're getting. And during the two-parter that focuses on Mike's wedding, we've got the fact that Charlie helps Maylee give birth, and we have the fact that Charlie's grandfather dies, and it's basically the whole other side story to Mike's wedding. And so for that reason, even though Mike gets married, I'm gonna have to say Charlie wins this series. Series 7 Part 1, and it's again a mix between Jodie and Ryan. Now, the two-part intro does focus a lot on Sasha. However, Jodie is very much integral to the storyline. She's the one who finds out that Freya is doing something wrong, and the reason why Sasha is acting up, and she's the one who ends up helping to save the day. And throughout this series, there's a lot to do with Jodie, such as her getting ready to do with her boxing, like in the episode Snake, and she's very relevant throughout all of the other episodes. But with Ryan, we've also got the fact that he's getting ready to leave the dumping ground, and we see his story arc about him trying to change and become a bit more mature for adulthood, like when he's introduced to working with the farm animals at the barns. And the final episode is a brilliant episode all about Ryan's mum returning, where Ryan does end up leaving. However, it's not a two-parter, which to me would suggest that it's not as important as some of the other episodes, and for that reason, I'm going to say Jodie wins this one. Series 7 Part 2 has got to go to Mike. There is a 3-part finale focusing on Mike's past and his brother and his life in care. It discusses all of Mike's life in care, such as a child and then as a care worker, and we get the proms, which is basically a big celebration of being a care worker and all of Mike's care kids. We get a really beautiful montage moment at the end where Mike ends up hearing Tracy Beaker's voice, and if this was the ending episode, I wouldn't be surprised, because when Mike leaves, it feels like it's the end of the dumping ground. And we get to see Mike's final time with introducing a new care kid into the dumping ground, being Katie. The entire 3-part is all about him. It's definitely Mike's series. Series 8 Part 1, it's all about Tyler and Jodie and their relationship. They're finally together after the proms, and this is their series about trying to hide their relationship without being found out. Now, the 2-part intro and the 2-part finale focuses on both of them. We've got the 2-part intro, which is all about Maylee trying to get the job, but Jodie ends up making it go all wrong for her. But that episode also heavily focuses on Tyler, because Tyler is the one who tries to keep the house together when Jodie is just being arrogant and not wanting to help when they have really bad care workers. And then we also have the 2-part finale, which is Trouble in Paradise, which is all about Tyler getting a chance to move abroad, and then Jodie and him running away once they're caught that they're together. We get the return of Electra, and it's brilliant, and unfortunately it ends with Tyler leaving and Jodie staying there. Not broken up, but Jodie staying at the dumping ground. So it's a bit of a mix-up between who would win. However, in the middle episode, it's a whole episode focused on Tyler and his father. And all of these storylines are pretty much about Tyler and Jodie clinging on to their relationship, such as the reason why they end up running away in the first place is because it's Tyler's journey to leave the dumping ground to go abroad, and only Jodie is just clinging on to him. So for that reason, I'm going to say Tyler wins this series. Now, Series 8 Part 2 to Series 9 Part 2 is a bit of a weird time for the show because they were filming during the pandemic, and so every episode is very much its own unique thing. There's not really a main storyline throughout, and there's not really a main character, I would say. So I did struggle a bit with these ones, but I think I found sort of a compromise. So Series 8 Part 2, I'm going to have to say it's between Jodie, Sasha, Jay, and Bird. You guys can decide which character wins this one, because there are lots of episodes focusing on all of them. Series 9 Part 1, it's either going to be Jay or Sasha. We've got the intro episode, which is all about Jay. The outro episode is all about Sasha and her brother Murphy joining. And there's lots of episodes in between that focus on them, such as Jay and his relationship. We've got Sasha's Zoom call, which is one of my favourite episodes. So that whole series basically just focuses on episodes to do with them. Series 9 Part 2 is all about Jodie. It is Jodie's last official series, even though she does slightly appear in Series 10. Again, this series has lots of episodes focusing on different people, but Jodie is definitely the standout ones. We have episodes like Friend Zone, testing Jodie and Sasha's friendship, and of course Sasha's leaving episode, which is very hard on Jodie, and the finale focuses on Tyler's return to Jodie after Jodie finds out that Kingsley has unexpectedly passed away. And so this series pretty much just focuses on Jodie. Series 10 part 1 is a bit of a funny one because we've got so many people leaving. We've got Bird leaving, we've got Jodie leaving, we've got Mei Lee leaving, but we also have Candy Rose leaving, and I'd say Candy Rose is definitely the main character. Whilst there is also loads of new characters joining, like Bonnie and all of her friends, and we've got the 2-part intro that focuses on Jodie, Candy Rose is pretty much affected by everyone who is leaving. Bird is her closest friend, Jodie is her closest friend, and they both leave. And the finale is meant to focus on Mei Lee leaving, but instead it focuses on Candy Rose because Candy Rose's parents appear and find out where Candy Rose is. And so the finale is actually really tragic. We see Candy Rose having to change her name, we see her having to relocate to a whole new dumping ground, and Mei Lee's leaving episode is basically overshadowed by Candy Rose leaving. And the middle episode also focuses on who is Candy Rose and who is this persona who she's made up for herself. Series 10 part 2, I'm gonna have to give it to Floss. She finally deserves a series to herself, considering she has been there for the longest and is now the longest standing character since it rebooted from Tracy Beaker Returns. And there's quite a few episodes focusing on her. We get episodes like The Mole Hunt, where Floss is trying to cope with all of the new younger kids in the DG, and her leaving episode, which sees the return of loads of iconic characters from this show. And then Series 11 is sort of like a reboot for the show. There is so many different options as to who could be a main character here. There's a lot going on in this series, such as it starts looking at the new care home with the new care workers. We've got the introduction of the secret gang, but I'd say the focus is mainly between Bonnie and Sabrina's friendship. And of course we have the ending episode where they do their song together and it's a big moment, but I'd say the winner has to be Sabrina for this, simply because throughout this series we've had her trying to look for where her mum is. We've got the middle episode being Mum's World, and the ending episode is Sabrina's mum finally appears, and it's suggested that she might be leaving the show. It's kind of like a repeat of Series 1 because we have the first episode focusing on her, like it did with Faith, the middle episode focusing on her and her family, like it did with Faith, and the final episode focusing on Sabrina, like it did with Faith. And so that is a long list of series. So to make it easier for you, I've put it in a graph. Let's take a look. Okay, here we are with all of the main characters plotted out throughout each series, and it's actually a lot more different than you might initially think, because originally I would have said Jodie was the main character, but from this graph here, you can see that actually she's not in it huge amounts, and there's a lot of other characters popping up. Now, this is the initial graph, basically looking at all of the potential main characters before we narrowed them down to who we think is the actual main character. For example, in Series 3, even though we said Harry wins, we're looking at the fact that potentially Carmen, Ryan, and T could have all been a main character throughout that series. And it's quite spread out, to be honest. If we move it along to the people who we've said are the main characters, it looks like this. And it's more different than I thought. Jodie doesn't actually appear as a main character until Series 6, and she doesn't get a main character moment just to herself until Series 7. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this graph to find out truly who is the main character of the dumping ground, who here appears most, and here are the answers. So we've got Jodie, who appears 4 times. 2 solo times, so a series focusing just on herself, and 2 shared, which is in Series 6 and Series 8. Now, we've got 2 solo times for Tyler as well, 3 for Sasha, and 2 for Ryan. Those have the most out of any other character, and to be honest, that makes pretty much sense. When I think of the dumping ground, the characters who I think of for the early years are definitely Ryan and Tyler, and for the later years, I definitely think of Jodie and Sasha, and so it makes sense. But who has the most? Well, of course, it is Jodie, who shares in this result 275%. But that's only 275% out of a total of 1900%, which means Jodie only is the main character of the dumping ground for as little as 14.47% of this entire show. She's barely classed as the main character for less than 20% of the show, which to me just doesn't seem to make sense, because whenever I think of the show and who I think of the main character, I always think it's Jodie, but this result here would suggest that it isn't. Now, of course, this answer is very much over-exaggerated because it's looking at the results via each series. So it isn't taking into account all of those times that Jodie or any other character has been really relevant in each other series, because once it has chosen its main character for the series, it gets rid of all of those other results. And so Jodie's result would likely be slightly more higher, but so would everyone else's. But regardless, it's a lot lower than I initially thought it would be. And it's interesting that this result also excludes some very key characters. Finn and Mei Lee have been in hundreds of episodes of The Dumping Ground and yet don't appear here at all. But what do you guys think about this? Do you think this shows an accurate representation of who the main character of The Dumping Ground is? Or do you think The Dumping Ground does not have a main character? This to me would suggest that it definitely does not have a main character. Who would you say is the main character? Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments. And as always, we've been here at Gated Theories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.